They've won 10 or more games the past 3 seasons, but can Washington do it again in 2019? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Washington was just a few plays away from making the college football playoff in 2018. They lost by 5 to Auburn in the season opener. They lost on the road to Oregon by 3 points in overtime and lost in a big-time upset to California by 2. Despite all of that, Chris Petersen still led Washington to a Pac-12 title and a berth in the Rose Bowl, where they fell to Ohio State by 5 in Urban Meyer's final game. Now the question for 2019 is, can Washington replicate the success that they've had for the past couple years? It's going to be extremely tough. They lose their all-time leading passer in Jake Browning. They lose their all-time leading rusher in Myles Gaskin, and only return 2 starters on the defensive side of the ball, including their leader in Ben Burkervin. But offensively, they should be just fine. They do return 7 starters, and they bring in Jacob Eason at quarterback. He has big shoes to fill with Browning, but Eason had playing experience at Georgia before he decided to transfer. He sat out last year, so he's been in this Washington system for a little while, and I think he will do just fine in 2019. Salvin Ahmed, the backup running back to Myles Gaskin last year, had over 600 yards in 2018. So it's not like he hasn't had any playing experience. He should do fine and fill in the shoes nicely for Myles Gaskin. And Eason has the advantage of bringing back the top 3 wide receivers from Washington last year, including Aaron Fuller and Ty Jones. So this offense might see a slight drop off in the numbers, but not too drastic. Defensively, with only 2 starters back, that's going to be the biggest question. They allowed just 16.4 points per game last year, but can they keep those numbers around the same in 2019? Ben Burkervin's gone. Miles Bryant at nickelback will be the leader for this defense that only returns, like I said, 2 starters. So half those guys are going to be the leaders in 2019. Luckily for Washington, with this new team, with a new offense, and with a new faces on defense, they open up against Eastern Washington, who we see as pretty much the lone surefire victory for the Huskies in 2019. This will be a great game, an FCS opponent that they can't afford to overlook, but a great game to get a new quarterback implemented, to get some new offensive faces going, and a good game for the defense to get fairly comfortable. It should be an easy win for Washington here. And then they jump right into Pac-12 play with California, who the Huskies lost to 12-10 last year and didn't even allow an offensive touchdown. The Huskies threw a pick-6, and California hit 2 field goals to win that game by just 2 points. And California, holding Washington to just 10 points last year, could very well do that again this year in 2019. California is going to boast one of the most strong secondaries in the entire country, but offensively, California will struggle drastically. The offensive numbers will improve a little bit from last year. They can't really get any worse, but the defense will certainly be the strength for the Golden Bears. Revenge will be on Washington's mind. I think they own the offensive edge. They're going to be able to exploit a few weaknesses in this California defense, and Washington gets a big win in conference play to start off 2-0 and 1-0 in the Pac-12. And then they remain home to face off against Hawaii. Now, this is another game that they cannot afford to overlook. It's not a surefire victory. Hawaii also boasts one of the best quarterbacks in the group of 5, and Cole McDonald, who put up some crazy numbers for about the first half of last season before teams started to figure out the way Hawaii was playing. But the Rainbow Warriors returned 18 total starters. This game being at Washington, I think the Huskies take care of them, but I would not be surprised to see Cole McDonald and his Hawaii offense put up some good numbers against a Washington defense that is going to be trying to find themselves early on in 2019. Despite that, Washington gets another win, and they are 3-0. They go on the road to face BYU, and this is a game that, once again, this non-conference schedule for Washington is not easy by any means. For Eastern Washington, not a big deal, but Hawaii and BYU, those are games that they can't afford to overlook. Should be wins, but cannot afford to be overlooked. They're not just cupcake teams that you can automatically write down as a W. Last year, Washington beat BYU 35-7. This year, BYU is a completely different team. They returned 17 starters and finally found themselves a quarterback in Zach Wilson, who kind of emerged later last season, had a phenomenal performance in their bowl game, and Wilson, like Washington, returns his top 3 wide receivers. So this BYU offense is no joke. The defense should be improved with 8 returning starters. It's on the road. It's a trap game, absolutely, for the Huskies, but Washington goes on the road and I think defeats the Cougars, who will have a rough start to the season in 2019, but will pick things up as the season goes on. So Washington starting off 4-0. once again looking like a Pac-12 title contender, looking like a possible playoff contender in 2019 under Chris Petersen. They host USC, another Pac-12 conference game, and this is a USC team that's going to look completely different this season. They bring in JT Daniels, who's played last year but struggled at times. He was just a freshman, and that was to be expected. Now Graham Harrell comes in and is implementing this air raid offense with the Trojans, and from what I have seen, JT Daniels has thrived under this new offense. So this is going to be a tough battle for, once again, a Washington defense that could see some struggles and some challenges early on. The last time these two teams played, it was once again at Washington. USC upset the Huskies by 13 points. But this year, Washington gets their revenge over the Trojans. They beat USC, and they are 5-0 going into a big-time date against Stanford, one that will greatly affect the Pac-12 North standings. Now, the funny thing about Washington and Stanford is that these two teams have alternated wins since 2015. In 2015, it was Stanford that won. 16, it was Washington. 17, Stanford. 18, Washington. 19, it will once again be Stanford. The Cardinal will upset the Huskies in this game. Now, this is really the first true road test for Washington. This is also, in my opinion, the first true, I wouldn't say elite, but very solid quarterback that Washington will face in 2019, KJ Costello. Stanford will not be relying much on the run now that Bryce Love is gone. And while they have a solid replacement in them, this is a team that's really going to hone in on the passing game. I think KJ Costello has himself a big night. It is on the road. Stanford, despite only returning 9 starters, is still going to be tough with David Shaw at the helm. And the Cardinal get a big-time win over the Huskies to send them to 5-1. They cannot afford to overlook Arizona as a potential trap game. Hung over after this Stanford loss, Washington still in the hunt for the Pac-12 title. The key for Washington's defense is, of course, going to be able to shut down Khalil Tate and J.J. Taylor at the running back position. Arizona is going to be a lot more improved with Kevin Sumlin in year 2. Playing out in the desert is not an easy place to play by any means, but Chris Petersen's teams rarely have a hangover. They usually do bounce back. And while this game will be tough for the Huskies and maybe will be closer than they want, Washington will go on the road and defeat Arizona. Get a key bounce back win there. And then, October 19th, this is the game that could very well decide who wins the Pac-12 North Division. A home game against Oregon. Last year, as we mentioned, Washington went on the road and fell to the Ducks 30-27 in overtime. And Oregon is by far the most talented team in the Pac-12 North Division. They bring back 10 starters offensively, 7 on defense. Justin Herbert, the best quarterback in the Pac-12. They have C.J. Verdell at the running back position, Juwan Johnson at the wide receiver position. This is going to be a tough Oregon team to stop. But Washington will get the win over the Ducks at home. And that is the key in this one for me. I think by October 19th, Washington's defense starts to take some strides. And this will by far be their toughest defensive test of the season. But I think if they can rattle Justin Herbert early, they can get the win here in Seattle. They have a little bit of a revenge factor there as well after losing that game in devastating fashion last year. And I think Washington does beat Oregon at home. Because once again, this offense for Washington is going to be fairly potent. And they might be able to exploit some weaknesses in the Oregon defense as well. So now, Washington only has 1 loss. They have a win over Oregon. They could very well be in the driver's seat of this Pac-12 North Division. They get a much-needed bye week going into a big-time game against Utah, who has given Washington some fights over the past couple meetings. The Utes lost to Washington by 7 points in 2016, and that was with the year that Washington made the college football playoff. They lost by 3 points to the Huskies in 2017. And they lost twice to the Huskies in 2018, losing by 14 early on in the season and by 7, a 10-3 loss in the Pac-12 championship game. This year, even though Washington is coming off a bye, I am predicting a loss for Washington to the Utes. It's due. The Utes are due a win against Washington, and it comes now after this bye week. Utah, you've heard about them all offseason. They're going to be one of the most surprising teams of 2019 if they can stay healthy. Tyler Huntley back at quarterback, Zach Moss back at running back, and a very, very underrated defense. Utah is extremely dangerous in 2019, and when you look at the team last year, Washington had a better team in 2018 than they will in 2019. Utah, with their backup QB and their backup running back, nearly beat Washington in the Pac-12 title game last year. Utah gets a win on the road against Washington to send them for their second loss. So now, Washington fans begin to panic. Oregon could be back in the driver's seat of the Pac-12 North. They go on the road to Oregon State, a very big trap game for Washington as well, because Oregon State will be much improved going into 2019, but it will not be enough. Washington will get the win over the Beavers. Yes, they have Jake Luton. Yes, they have Jamar Jefferson. I expect Oregon State to be much more competitive, but you might not see a trend up in the win column. Washington goes on the road and defeats Oregon State. And then they get another bye week going on the road against Colorado. Another team kind of like Oregon State that will be competitive but might not see results in the win column. They have a very potent offense as well. Could maybe give this Washington defense some struggles early on. But coming off a week of rest, Colorado under new management and Mel Tucker and a defense that I think will struggle worse than this Washington one. I think Washington goes on the road and defeats the Buffaloes. And then, of course, Washington State in the Apple Cup. Washington has won 6 straight games over their rival in the Cougars. Last year, it was a thriller, kind of, in the snow. It was a fun game to watch. 28-15 victory for Washington that prevented the Cougars from getting to the Pac-12 championship game. This year, it is back at home for the Huskies. Washington State loses some key starters, but will once again thrive offensively under Mike Leach. Despite all of that, Washington will get another close win against the Cougars to extend their winning streak to 7 over Washington State. And they will close the season 10-2 in 2019. And the question remains, will that be good enough to get to the Pac-12 championship game? It will not be good enough to get to the college football playoff. But will it be good enough to win the Pac-12 North and maybe have a potential rematch against Utah in the Pac-12 championship game? Chris Petersen going to do another phenomenal job with the Huskies, though, and it will certainly be fun to watch how the 2019 season plays out. So guys, as always, thank you for watching us here. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert, and check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter, check out our videos, and sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will receive every single one of our 2019 spread picks, including the postseason. And I can promise you it is a deal and an opportunity that you certainly do not want to pass up. So join the team. Go sign up today in the description below at thegridironexpert.com. And guys, as always, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.